The great question. Imagine waking up one day to realize that the version of you that's loved, respected, admired, even envied, isn't really you. Not entirely. It's a composite, a carefully filtered reflection of who you think you're supposed to be. A version of you crafted through years of silent observation, copying smiles that seem to earn approval, tailoring your opinions to avoid confrontation, deleting parts of yourself that felt too much or not enough. And yet, this version, the curated self, receives more praise, more validation, more opportunity than the raw, unfiltered person you hide in the quiet corners of your soul. Think back. How often have you laughed at a joke you didn't find funny, complimented someone you secretly envied, nodded along while swallowing your real thoughts? How often have you posted a photo, not because it was real, but because it fit the aesthetic? In that moment, a subtle transaction took place. Authenticity was traded for approval, and you were rewarded for it. The unsettling part. You didn't even realize it was happening. No alarm bell went off, no internal rebellion sounded the alert. Instead, you were flooded with dopamine, the brain's little thank you for being accepted. But here lies the paradox. The more you're rewarded for being fake, the harder it becomes to be real. You begin to fear that showing your true self would result in rejection, ridicule, or worst of all, indifference. So you keep up the performance, a performance that never ends. At school, at work, online, even in front of the mirror, you become fluent in the art of hiding your sadness with sarcasm, your confusion with confidence, your rage with politeness, all while collecting applause for the mask, never the person beneath it. But why does this happen? Why does society, a construct built by people like you and me, systematically elevate artifice over authenticity? Why are we drawn to polished personas while flinching at raw vulnerability? Why does the world seem to prefer the edited version of you over the uncut footage? Is it because the truth is too messy, too unpredictable, too human? Or could it be that we've collectively agreed, silently, unconsciously, to maintain a lie, because the truth would force us to confront something unbearable, that we've built an entire civilization on performance, not presence? Consider this. From childhood, we are graded not just on what we know, but on how well we present it. Those who learn to play the game, who smile at the right time, say the right thing, wear the right mask, are promoted, celebrated, protected. Meanwhile, those who speak with brutal honesty, who cry too loudly or dream too wildly, are labeled as difficult, unstable, or dramatic. The lesson is clear. Conformity is rewarded, authenticity is punished, not overtly, not violently, but subtly, with cold shoulders, withheld praise, passed over promotions, algorithmic invisibility. And so, without ever choosing to, you adapt. You adjust your tone, trim your edges, reshape your story to fit the mold, a mold that was never designed for your real self in the first place. But then, late at night, when the applause fades and the lights go out, a question begins to whisper. Who are you really when no one's watching? When you're not trying to impress, persuade, entertain, or please? Do you even recognize that person anymore? Or have you become so entangled in your performance that the original script has been lost? What happens when the world loves a version of you that you yourself cannot stand? What happens when the very traits that make you successful feel like a betrayal of who you truly are? And most haunting of all, what if the longer you pretend, the harder it becomes to remember what's real? You begin to see the hidden cost of being rewarded for a lie. It's not just a matter of lost time or missed connections. It's existential, a slow erosion of identity, a quiet death by inauthenticity. And yet, it doesn't feel like death. It feels like survival. It feels like fitting in. It feels like winning, because society has carefully designed it that way. It hands out rewards for obedience, validation for performance, and punishment, subtle, insidious punishment, for truth. Not because society is evil, but because it is afraid of the chaos that truth brings, afraid of the discomfort that rawness demands, afraid of the mirror that authenticity holds up. And so you are caught between the desire to be real and the pressure to be accepted, between the soul's hunger for truth and the ego's craving for applause. You wonder, is it even possible to live authentically without being exiled from the tribe? Or is the price of being real simply too high? This is where the illusion begins to crack. Because buried beneath the performance, hidden under layers of pretense, is a wound you didn't create, but one you now carry. And the deeper question is no longer, why am I being rewarded for being fake? But rather, who taught me that I had to be fake in the first place? The hidden problem. Its psychological, philosophical roots. Now ask yourself, when did you first learn to pretend? Was it when you were 5, standing stiff in a school uniform, rehearsing the right smile to earn a teacher's praise? Was it when you mimicked how your friends laughed, even when you didn't find the joke funny? Or was it later, when love and approval became conditional, based not on who you are, but who you appear to be? Somewhere along the way, the real you became an inconvenience. You learned, not through words but through wounds, that honesty might cost you connection, that vulnerability might invite mockery, that uniqueness might be punished, not celebrated. And so the mask began. But this isn't just your story. It's the architecture of society itself. Beneath the smooth veneers of everyday life, under the curated smiles of Instagram and the corporate dress codes of modern professionalism, lies a deeper truth. Authenticity has become a liability. Society doesn't just tolerate inauthenticity, it rewards it. And the reason isn't merely cultural, it's psychological, it's evolutionary, it's existential. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But what he also taught, and what many forget, is that every person wears a persona, a social mask constructed to navigate the expectations of the external world. It isn't inherently evil, it's adaptive. The problem begins when we confuse the mask for the face beneath. In a world obsessed with impressions, the persona becomes permanent. You no longer wear the mask, you become it. Let's go deeper. Evolutionarily, humans are social animals. We survived not by brute strength or speed, but by bonding. To be cast out of the group once meant death, so the brain evolved a powerful feedback system, the need for approval. This wasn't vanity, it was survival. When your ancestors changed their tone, their posture, or their opinions to match the tribe's, it wasn't cowardice, it was intelligence. But fast forward to today's hyper-connected, performance-driven culture, and that same survival instinct has metastasized. Today, the tribe is the internet. The approval is quantified in likes and shares. The exile isn't physical death, it's digital invisibility, professional failure, or social alienation. And so, people perform, not once or twice, but habitually. The real self, which is messy, contradictory, and full of mystery, is buried under layers of strategic performance. And here's the cruel twist. The world often applauds the performance more than the truth. Consider Arthur Schopenhauer's view. He belies that much of life is driven not by reason or virtue, but by will, a blind, striving force that operates beneath consciousness. According to him, people don't seek truth. They seek power, comfort, and the minimization of suffering. Authenticity, by its nature, disrupts those aims. It exposes vulnerability, it challenges power structures, it creates discomfort, which is why, in most institutions, from schools to corporations, conformity is not only encouraged, but demanded. Uniforms, jargon, scripts, etiquette, they all serve a common function, to suppress individuality and ensure predictable behavior. The more predictable you are, the more professional, the more civilized, the more successful you appear. But what is the cost? Jean-Paul Sartre, in Being and Nothingness, explores the idea of bad faith, a form of self-deception where individuals deny their own freedom by conforming to roles imposed by society. A waiter, he says, who tries too hard to act like a waiter becomes inauthentic, reducing himself to a caricature. He is not being, he is performing. And this performance becomes a kind of prison. It's the same with you. Every time you say yes when you mean no, every time you agree to avoid conflict, every time you suppress a truth to maintain peace, you reinforce the bars of a cage built by cultural expectation. The paradox? You build the prison, but you call it freedom. You call it adulthood. You call it success. And society smiles and claps because a predictable you is a controllable you. But here's what most people never realize. This problem is not just out there. In systems, in schools, in institutions, it lives inside you. It's internalized. By the time you reach adulthood, the need to please, to perform, to be palatable becomes unconscious. You no longer even know what your authentic self looks like, sounds like, feels like. You fear silence because it might reveal your disconnection. You fear stillness because it might uncover your anxiety. And so, you keep moving, keep posting, keep achieving, all while slowly forgetting who you are. Even religion and spirituality, which once aimed to awaken the self, are now often reduced to performance. Meditating to appear zen, journaling for aesthetics, quoting Rumi for social media likes, authenticity is replaced by aesthetic. And capitalism, clever as it is, monetizes the mask. It sells you identity in the form of brands, beauty products, job titles, and lifestyle choices. You don't just buy things, you buy personas. The rebel, the intellectual, the minimalist, the entrepreneur, all pre-packaged and pre-approved. And with each purchase, the real you fades a little more. Viktor Frankl once wrote that man's deepest desire is not pleasure, but meaning. Yet meaning cannot exist in performance. It arises only in truth, raw, unfiltered, unpolished truth. But the world rarely rewards that, because real truth is messy. It doesn't fit into a caption. It doesn't sell well. It doesn't make for good optics. Which is why the system, knowingly or not, conditions you to fear it. But don't mistake this for a conspiracy. It's not some master plan. It's a consequence of history, of evolution, of fear. And unless you become conscious of it, unless you step back and see the strings that pull your performance, you'll live your entire life on autopilot, clapping at your own cage. You'll call it achievement when it's really assimilation. You'll call it peace when it's really numbness. You'll call it happiness when it's really just relief. Relief that you're still accepted, still approved, still not cast out. But deep down, something will ache. A silent, persistent ache that no applause can soothe. That's the real problem. Not that society rewards the fake you, but that, over time, you might forget there was ever a real you to begin with. The unseen consequences. You go about your day, and everything seems normal. People smile at you when they need to, nod in agreement when required, post their successes on social media like little glowing gems in a crown of curated perfection. The office hums with fluorescent civility. The family dinner is dotted with polite gestures, and every conversation feels just a bit too edited, as if everyone is performing a silent screenplay where authenticity was cut in the first draft. But what if this theater of personas has consequences far more corrosive than we ever dared to believe? What if the true cost of wearing the mask isn't just personal fatigue or burnout, but a slow erosion of reality itself? See, when society rewards the fake you, it's not just encouraging performance, it is actively punishing authenticity. In a culture where vulnerability is often mislabeled as weakness and image becomes currency, being real becomes an act of rebellion. And over time, you begin to split. Not metaphorically, psychologically. Carl Jung called this the split between the persona, the mask we present to the world, and the shadow, the parts we repress, deny, or ignore. The more rewarded the mask is, the more disowned the shadow becomes. And here's the paradox. The more you reject parts of yourself to fit in, the more fragmented and disconnected you feel, even if you appear to be succeeding. You don't just lose access to your truth, you start forgetting it ever existed. Imagine being applauded not for your honesty, but for your ability to play the game. Promotions go not to those who speak with integrity, but to those who smile through lies. Relationships flourish not because of emotional depth, but because of mutual enabling. Influencers gain millions of followers not for wisdom, but for their aesthetic manipulation. The deeper tragedy is this. You start internalizing the applause. You start believing the applause is you. And what gets neglected? your intuition, your sadness, your contradictions, your humanity, slowly with "Ears in the dark," unacknowledged. Modern culture, fueled by algorithms and image economies, turns identity into a product. Social media doesn't ask you to be whole, it asks you to be clickable. Corporate environments don't incentivize truth, they prioritize predictability. Even family systems often silently pressure conformity, where playing the good son, the strong mother, the quiet daughter earns love more consistently than raw honesty. And so begins the silent crisis. People navigating their lives feeling admired but never known. Loved, perhaps, but never seen. Celebrated for a facade they themselves no longer feel connected to. Psychologically, this creates a state of what existentialists like Jean-Paul Sartre described as bad faith, a mode of living where we deceive ourselves to avoid the anxiety of true freedom. We lie to ourselves about our desires. We pretend we are mere roles, mere employees, mere profiles. Why? Because the truth of our individuality, the fact that we are always becoming, always fluid, always uncertain, is too overwhelming in a world that demands clarity, neatness, and instant labels. But this lie has a cost. It leads to a deep existential nausea, a creeping sense of absurdity. You wake up one morning, in the job you trained for, in the home you built, surrounded by people you impressed, and yet feel utterly alien in your own life, as if you are haunting your own existence. Cognitive science even backs this up. Studies in self-discrepancy theory show that the greater the gap between the actual self and the idealized or ought self, the version society expects, the more psychological distress we feel. Anxiety, depression, imposter syndrome, and burnout aren't just random, they are symptoms of sustained disconnection from authenticity. Our nervous system wasn't designed to perform constantly, it was designed to be. And yet, when being is punished and performance is rewarded, our biology turns against us. This societal reward system also distorts relationships. If you are loved for a role you play, not for your truth, then every compliment feels hollow. Every approval feels conditional. Vulnerability becomes a risk instead of a bridge. We edit ourselves in real time, calculating how much truth a person can tolerate. We develop emotional calluses, not from war, but from smiling too much when we wanted to scream. And worst of all, we begin passing this on. Children watch us perform and learn that pretending is survival. Generations replicate the silent trauma of hiding. But perhaps the most damning consequence is this. When society rewards the fake you, it starves the collective soul. We end up living in a civilization built on simulations where no one truly knows what is real anymore. Philosophers like Baudrillard warned about this. The hyper-real, a world of signs and images that simulate reality without any anchor to truth. In such a world, authenticity becomes subversive, honesty becomes revolutionary, and inner silence, the kind that lets you hear your real self, becomes nearly impossible in the constant noise of performance. So here we are, trapped in applause we don't believe in, surrounded by reflections that don't see us, haunted by versions of ourselves that bring success but not peace. The deeper we go into this labyrinth, the harder it becomes to remember the way out. But what if there was a way to break this spell? What if rebellion wasn't loud or violent, but quiet, internal and transformative? What if the first crack in the illusion begins the moment we dare to live without the mask? The rebellion. How to break free. But what happens when you finally stop pretending? What if just once you looked in the mirror and said, "I don't want to play this game anymore"? Rebellion doesn't always look like fire and fists, says. Sometimes it begins in silence, the quiet revolution of finally telling the truth. Not to the world, not even to those you love, but to yourself. The truth that you're exhausted, that the performance has become unbearable, that you've built a version of yourself so palatable, so curated, that even you aren't sure who you are beneath it all. And here is where it starts, the great turning, the undoing of all the camouflage. But be warned, authenticity isn't the warm, glowing buzzword it's made out to be in Instagram captions. It's raw. It's destabilizing. It threatens the entire infrastructure of the life you've constructed around your false self. Because the moment you start telling the truth, the moment you drop the performance, something terrifying happens. People begin to pull away. They liked the agreeable you, the polite you, the self-deprecating, smooth-edged, watered-down version of you, the you who nodded when you wanted to scream, the you who smiled when you wanted to collapse. The fake you kept the peace. The real you, the one with opinions, boundaries, pain, rage, and longing, disrupts the equilibrium. That's why the first step to reclaiming your identity is being willing to be alone, not forever, but long enough to detox from the addiction to approval. You have to let go of the applause long enough to hear your own voice again. Carl Jung warned us, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But that privilege comes at a cost. Jung believed that the unexamined self, the self that avoids shadow, that hides from contradiction, is doomed to projection. You will be endlessly haunted by the parts of yourself you refuse to face. And society, always eager to reward your falsehoods, will weaponize your avoidance for its gain. But there is another path. Begin by noticing. When you laugh, is it real? When you agree, do you mean it? When you sigh, I'm fine, is it true? Every false signal you send reinforces the prison walls. So you begin by chipping away, one truth at a time, one risk at a time, and perhaps it starts with something small, declining an invitation you don't want, saying, I don't know, when you don't know, wearing something that actually makes you feel like yourself, even if it's not on trend. These are your first acts of defiance. These are your early sparks of rebellion. But there's more. Because at the heart of this revolt is a confrontation not just with society, but with your inner tyrant, the part of you that polices your authenticity more harshly than any external judge. That voice that says, don't say that, they'll think you're weird, or you'll never be good enough, or who do you think you are? That voice is your conditioning made flesh, and it doesn't disappear with self-help quotes. It takes radical self-confrontation. It takes rituals of honesty. Some start journaling every thought they censor. Others record voice notes to themselves, practicing unfiltered expression. Some go on long walks with no destination, just to reconnect with their own rhythm. Others step away from social media entirely, reclaiming the space their mind once gave away to algorithms. These are not luxuries. These are psychological survival techniques. They are the resistance strategies of those who choose to live awake. And as you unmask layer after layer, you'll feel disoriented. What remains when the persona dissolves? Nietzsche said, one must still have chaos in oneself to be able to give birth to a dancing star. That chaos is the fertile soil of your real identity, not the role you were assigned, but the essence you were born with. It is dangerous, it is wild, it is not always polite, but it is true. And when you start showing up as that person, messy, contradictory, alive, you may lose some people. But you will also attract others who are hungry for the same thing. Truth recognizes truth, and slowly a new tribe forms, not of perfect people, but of honest ones. People who are done with performance, who find peace not in approval, but in alignment. Viktor Frankl, survivor of Auschwitz and pioneer of logotherapy, believed that meaning, not happiness, is what sustains us. And meaning can only emerge from authenticity. The search for happiness often leads to the trap of performance. But the pursuit of meaning demands we risk being seen, truly seen, even in our brokenness. That is the rebellion, that is the revolution. Not to escape the system, but to walk through it untouched. To live in a world that wants to commodify your soul, and to say no. To refuse to be tamed, to be a wild, breathing contradiction, fully alive, fully human. And it all begins when you stop clapping for your own disguise. When you begin to love the sound of your real voice echoing back to you in an empty room, that is the sound of freedom. That is the music of the unmasked self. The ultimate truth. The final, most powerful realization. So what is left when the applause fades? When the mask falls, the roles crumble, the crowd disperses, and you are alone with yourself. Truly, finally alone. This is not loneliness. This is clarity. This is the quiet at the bottom of everything. No spotlight, no curated bio, no filtered face smiling through the algorithm. Just you, raw, unedited, and breathtaking in your complexity. And in that silence, in that weightless moment of absolute self-exposure, something emerges. A truth not wrapped in self-help slogans or personal branding mantras, but one that has haunted mystics, poets, and philosophers for centuries. You were never broken. You were never lacking. You were simply buried, layer upon layer of shoulds and musts, and this is how you're supposed to be, hardened around your being like armor. But underneath all that noise, you were whole, not perfect, not polished, but whole, in the way a thunderstorm is wet. Whole, in the way a jagged mountain is whole, in the way grief and joy are both holy. The greatest lie you've ever been sold is that something outside you, a degree, a partner, a following, a transformation, a status, will complete you. But the truth is what the sages of every tradition have whispered for millennia. There is nowhere to go, nothing to become. You are it, already, right now, even in your uncertainty, even in your trembling, even in your contradictions. And when you see this, truly, viscerally see it, something shifts forever. You stop striving to be enough because you recognize you already are. You stop bending to be loved because you realize real love begins when you stop bending. You stop apologizing for existing in your fullness, your intensity, your softness, your eccentricities, your depth, because you understand your existence is not a negotiation. It is a fact. It is a miracle. But here's the most terrifying part. Once you see this, you can't unsee it. The old games stop working. The compliments that used to thrill you feel hollow. The approval you used to crave becomes irrelevant. You realize how much time you spent trying to earn what you always had: dignity, worth, belonging. And so begins a deeper life, not louder, not flashier, but truer. You become harder to manipulate. Marketing tactics don't faze you. Trends don't define you. Other people's opinions lose their grip. You start asking different questions, not how can I be more liked, but what lights me up? Not how can I fit in, but where do I feel most alive? And most importantly, what part of myself have I still not welcomed home? Because even after the great unmasking, even after the rebellion, there will still be hidden rooms in your psyche, places where shame still lingers, where the conditioning still whispers. But now, instead of running, you enter those rooms. You bring light. You sit with the orphaned parts of your soul. The anger you were told was unladylike, the grief you buried because it was inconvenient, the dreams you abandoned. But because they weren't realistic, you become your own sanctuary, your own home, and as this process unfolds, you begin to notice something strange. The more you live in your truth, the more peace you feel, even when life is chaotic. Not because everything is perfect, but because nothing is pretending. There is a calmness in authenticity, a groundedness. You are no longer flailing in the ocean of other people's expectations. You are rooted, and from that rootedness, you begin to love differently. Not from neediness or performance, but from fullness. You don't need people to complete you. You choose them because they amplify what is already whole. You don't grasp, you don't shrink. You expand, and you invite others to do the same. This is the quiet revolution. This is the final, most powerful realization that your authenticity is not a brand. It is not a strategy. It is not a phase. It is the divine expression of life moving through you, unfiltered. And when you honor it, you give everyone around you permission to do the same. That is the ripple effect. That is how the world changes, not through performance, but through presence. Not through perfection, but through honesty. You don't have to fix the whole system. You don't have to win every argument or save the world. You just have to show up, fully, vulnerably, unmasked, and in doing so you become a lighthouse for others still lost in the fog of performance. So let the old self die. Let the curated character dissolve. Let the applause fall silent. And in that silence, breathe. Because now, finally, you are free. You don't need to be impressive. You just need to be real. And that is the rarest, most powerful thing of all. Not because it's perfect, but because it's true.